Okay, welcome back, everybody. You can see before you a fantastic panel of speakers lined up to talk to you about the impact AgriTech can have and is having on UK farms. So first, let's meet them all. Incredible range of knowledge we've got here. We've got Claire Hodge, Head of Crops at Agri-EPI Centre, Mark Tufnell, who you'll all know is President of the CLA, Tom Bradshaw, Deputy President of the National Farmers Union. Penelope Bossom is Managing Partner of Overbury Enterprises. Bryn Thomas, over there at the far end, is a partner at Harrison Clark Rickaby's and a farmer. Dr. Julie Ingram, from the Countryside and Community Research Institution, who has lots of very interesting thoughts on big data. And James Wright, Product Manager and also a farmer at Breedr, which is really driving forward AgriTech in a big way. I'm going to start with Claire. Sit down. So Claire, Agri-EPI is all about connecting new agricultural technologies and the clever people who develop them with farmers on the ground. And I don't know if anyone was at Down to Earth in Shropshire this week, the Regen Ag event, but you had a stand there, very busy, lots of people queuing up to talk to people. So you really are there on the ground with farmers and land managers. Can you set out the stall for us? What are the opportunities for AgriTech in the UK? And crucially, are we making the most of them?
We are in a really privileged position that we get to work with some of the best farmers in the country and have a network of 25 farms who are really progressive, innovative people. And that's where we start. We start with the farm's needs and then consider the big picture and how do we think about those big ideas about the environment, the future of food production. But ultimately, these businesses can't be successful unless they can get through the everyday challenges. So we bring together technology companies and really get into the needs of the farm and the farm businesses and how do we take that forward and then understand the technology that'll solve it. And that's the key important area, is putting the technology into the issues and concerns of the farm businesses to be fit for the future. So the kind of things that we get to work on at the moment is we're looking at harvesters, engineering solutions. We can look at big picture, we look at data, understanding kind of high level issues of algorithms and thinking about how you use the soil better, how you use labour better, and thinking about, again, the real life solutions and the solutions that go along there and bringing in companies and ideas from all around the world and all around the globe to solve those, but making sure the farmer's at the centre of it and the farm business is absolutely the core of what we do. And then thinking about the future is how can we get more of this adoption and how do we make it integrated to more businesses, more farms, and then we can all have more success in what we're doing. So the technology, I feel, is it's got to be farmer first, farmer led, but bring in the clever people that can make that really happen.
You're kind of the matchmaker, bringing these
Absolutely,
these two
we're the
together.
matchmakers.
Fantastic. Talking about feelings sort of among landowners, among farmers, over to you, Mark Tufnell. From what you're hearing from your members, are farmers and landowners welcoming these solutions with open arms, or is there still a degree of reticence out there? We know that change is never easy.
I do actually farm as well. I farm near Cirencester, and we do have what I call AgriTech on our farm. And I think a lot of our members probably realise or don't think that they have it. They don't think that RTK on their tractor that makes them drive in a straight line is AgriTech. Well, it is. They don't think that variable rate spreading for P&K and nitrogen is AgriTech, but it is. They don't think that inter-row hoeing, which we do, is AgriTech, but it is. Now, there are lots of other exciting things within AgriTech that relate to horticulture, arboriculture, and all those other areas where members wish to save on labour. We know how we're having huge, great labour issues, particularly in places like Kent, when we have terrible problems picking the produce. So if we can use the technology, then we can help save on our labour cost. Now, it's expensive, all this kit, and people are always wary of change. But this is the fourth agricultural revolution. You know, people have got to wake up to change, and the government, you'll never believe it, is actually throwing large quantities of money at it. I know you've got to get used to all the terminology. It's all there on the various web pages, but there are lots and lots of schemes out there, and you need to ask the CLA. You might even be brave and ask the NFU. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And it's a really good point. I suppose my great-grandfather's first tractor would have been AgriTech. So, AgriTech has been there throughout the farming journey for many, many years. Tom Bradshaw, the government's recently published food strategy says new technologies will be a key component to sustainable production and commits £270 million of funding for innovation right across agriculture. But it also recognises small and medium-sized enterprises, which would include farmers, need more tailored support to take up these solutions. What's the general attitude towards AgriTech among NFU members, and what kind of support are they calling for?
So I guess behind all of this, Anna, sits a desire to improve efficiency, to drive sustainability, and that's something that the farming industry and food producers have been doing for decades and for centuries. And whether it be the genetics in your livestock, the genetics in your plants, that's all the adoption of technology, which is something that we've all been selecting for over generations and over lifetimes. So the move into technology is just another step forward in a different direction. There's always going to be early adopters, and then there'll be those who take more persuading. I've been an early adopter of a lot of technology on farm, but actually it's cost me money rather than delivering profit. And so that's the really fine line is promising too much when actually it's not at the stage of delivery where it really can enhance the bottom line. And I guess my focus for members is making sure that it really does drive an increase and improvement in profitability alongside productivity, and that we are able to capture some of the value of that at a farm level, because there's no point being more efficient unless as members they can capture the value and they can be profitable for the future. So what does help look like? And again, that'll be on a business-by-business case. We welcome the support and the realization that innovation is important. I think that funding was already committed under the ATP and it's under their productivity schemes, and so it's just now being crystallized into one lump sum. So it's not new money; it's just very clear where it's coming from. But there will be, support grants are very welcome. But they've got to be targeted at exactly the right technology so that it is at the right stage to adopt at a farm level, because you can go too early and you can go too late. And I guess that is trying to find that sweet spot where it really is targeted at the right moment in time. And then we know, for instance, that there are an end tester. A company has given out a lot of end testers this year to try and improve fertilizer efficiency. But actually only a third of those end testers were used because the farmers didn't believe the information, they didn't believe it would work, and maybe because they hadn't had to invest themselves and they were given that technology, they didn't utilize it. So it is a really fine balance as to how we really develop the whole industry and move them, and we have to accept they'll all go at a different speed.
Just a very quick follow-up to that. Were we at the stage where a lot of farmers were sort of leaning into the idea of AgriTech, and now we're seeing these rocketing costs on farm, a slight pulling away, like, oh, that's just fallen down my list of priorities. It was up here, but the world has changed very dramatically. It's had to go down here a bit.
For me, I think that it's got to be a business investment decision. There's got to be a key payback, which is very clear, that helps drive productivity, drive profitability. And actually, the sales pitch should be very clear. If there's anything ambiguous at the moment, if there isn't a clear return on investment, then the likelihood to find the cash is going to be very difficult.
Thank you very much. Penelope, just before we came on stage here, Penelope said, I'm not a farmer, I'm a techie. And I was like, well, this is the right place for you. Could you just give us some real-world, tangible examples of how you're using AgriTech at Overbury Enterprises?
I think profitability is vital. And Overbury Enterprises, if we don't make a profit, we ain't going to exist. And looking at the questions of frustration, of filling out forms, of checking everything, the other key driver is if it makes life easier, so you can have an easier time and our teams can have a safer and easier time, then that's important. I think you've got two sides. You've got the networks, and I was very lucky to be involved early on broadband. So we went through the pains of going from dial-up to ADSL in a cabinet, and my very, very techie friends told me that fibre would be easier, so we actually put fibre in ourselves across the farm, and I haven't had to worry too much about the ghastly BT fibre in the cabinet, which is very, very good for not farms, for suburbia, because you're nearer, the technology works better. What are we actually using? We're obviously using all the stuff in the office, and everything would be good if it was interoperable. It would be fantastic if our account system was more efficient at taking on long invoices, whether it's for our farming business, whether it's for our nursery school, for crayons, or whether it's for chemicals. It's great that our team have picked up their mobiles, and whether it's for 3 words, which is useful for finding this location or finding a sheep, or on the other side, using it for a safety thing.
Fantastic, thank you very much. And handing over seamlessly to ultimate techie, James Wright. Could you, for those of you, there might be people in the audience that haven't heard of Breedr or don't know what Breedr does. Could you just give us an overview of what Breedr does? And also, from a developer perspective, what remain the biggest barriers to tech take-up on farms from your side of the fence?
Yeah, so hello, I'm James, farmer as well. I run the product management at Breedr, and I suppose the best way of describing Breedr is it's auto trader for cattle. So when you buy a car, you want to see its logbook, its MOT, its service history. On Breedr, at the point that you purchase livestock, you can see what vaccinations it's had, whether or not it's had a calf, its weight history. And that allows you to make the best decision about buying that cattle. And then also, because we've got all that data, we can then lend you money against those animals, so as they grow, you can take a bit of early equity out. So there are about 4,500 farmers in the UK who use Breedr. And just to give you an idea, in the last 5 days, we've weighed 14,000 cattle on British livestock farms, and farmers are doing that themselves. I suppose, as has been mentioned already, one of the big barriers is profitability. And how do you prove the value of investing in the technology if you have a limited margin? The core Breedr app is free, so farmers are able to download the app and weigh their cattle and sheep and track medicines and breeding information for free. And then when they come to sell the cattle or sheep, we take a commission. So we don't make money until the farmer makes money. And I think that modern business model is really important. It doesn't work when you sort of look at protein detectors in combine harvesters, because that's very expensive. When we look at apps, we should be promoting a business model where the app developer makes money at the same time that the farmer makes money.
Thank you very much, James. Bryn, just tell us a little bit about what you farm and how you see what you see as the key to meeting the technology challenge for the industry. Are we generally in a better place now?
Yeah, thanks, Anna. So we farm up in the Brecon Beacons. I've grown up on farms all my life. I used to farm in West Wales previous to that. We run a suckler herd, a pedigree Welsh black, Showerley cross suckler herd. We've got about 250 to 300 head, which is just outside the national park. We run that herd over about 300 acres of pasture. We've also got about 100 acres of woodland as well. And we've looked to diversify recently with holiday cottages on the farm in the last 2 or 3 years, which is bringing in a really good income and provides us with that extra revenue source, which as we've all said, we need at the moment. In terms of the keys to the challenges that we're meeting, it's to me, well, we're here, we're talking, we're engaging in the debate. It's about innovation and embracing the tech. But fundamentally, we have to get that relationship. And we talked at the CLA breakfast about relationships. And that's fundamentally what we've got to do. The farmers have got to have that relationship. The farmers, growers have that relationship with I'll say the techies, I mean it in the nicest possible way, and the researchers and the developers. Because farmers know best their requirements for on-farm in terms of arable and in terms of livestock as well, and welfare management, herd management. And so it's embracing that within that relationship that exists between between the farmer, the grower, and the developers, essentially. But we're seeing that with this food strategy. As we've mentioned, they've got the What Works Centre, and that's going to provide evidence to farmers to support the adoption of innovation. So it's that sort of, within the tech sphere, we've got to have this co-design, which we've got with the government in terms of policy and farmers. We want to see more of it, but that's the actual key here, so that we can work together. You know, that should be easier to achieve now. We're promoting the younger generation to get them into farming. We're changing the environmental schemes. There's a lump sum exit scheme. So it's going to breed fresh and new blood into the industry. And, you know, we've got massive challenges ahead. Food production, the population is going to be 9 billion by, 2050, probably more than that. The population is going up by 250 to 300,000 a day. And we've got to produce food sustainably, efficiently, under great climatic pressures and environmental pressures. But that's what we do. That's what farmers do. We're experts at producing food, so...
And experts at adapting, as they've had to do many times through history. Your point about relationship building, I'm going to pick that up with Claire shortly, because that's really what you do. But before I go to Claire, Dr. Julie Ingram, AgriTech, by its very nature, is going to and is generating huge, eye-popping quantities of data. When it comes to sort of ownership of data, protection of data, all of those issues, what are the concerns that you're hearing from the agricultural community in the context of this eye-wateringly rapid development?
Yes, thank you. I should say that I approach this, or my institute approaches this from a social science perspective. So we kind of zoom out and look at the big picture about what the social implications are of this rapid digital advancement. And a recent consultation we had with the agricultural community and with the academia highlighted data governance as a really big concern, ownership, access, control. Really the question is, how can farmers share data with anybody with confidence? Concerns about interoperability as well, and safety. So I think what we need to do is step back and think these things aren't delivered into a vacuum, if you like. There are people involved, there are social, political, economic, and ethical considerations that we have to think about. And it's a chance to approach it responsibly, if you like. One of the concerns that came up, for example, is that if we follow along a very intensive digital pathway, will we just reinforce the very specialized, industrialized agricultural trajectories that some farmers are on, which not everybody wants for the future? So is it a point to step back and think, can we use digital technologies to enable agroecology, for example, which the French are doing in a very big way? There are also some concerns about digital divides in the community, the haves and have-nots. That might be reinforced not only because of connectivity, but because of other capabilities and interests. Impacts on farmer identity and culture, if you like, and loss of knowledge, loss of indigenous knowledge and tacit knowledge that farmers own. So these are the sorts of concerns that are rumbling along in the community and also have been exposed in other European studies, in Australia, in America as well. But of course, there's great sides as well. It's a great enabler. It has huge potential, and farmers are already using these digital platforms to communicate with each other, to really advance their public image, if you like, as well, to give transparency to the provenance of food, to allow the citizens to come in and make it even a more democratic food system, if you like. So I think the overall message is, yes, let's step back, let's think about how we can include farmers in developing these technologies and data ownership and sharing, and take a more responsible approach.
Wow, there's a lot in that answer. Thank you so much. We'll come back and look at some of the issues that you've raised. I just wanted to go back to Bryn's point about building relationships. Claire, in your experience with Agri-EPI Centre, what do you think might need tweaking with that relationship? You know, I grew up on a traditional beef and sheep farm. I know that a farmer has a very different language to a software developer. How do you translate between those different cultures, different worlds, different jargons?
Yeah, I think there's been a history of agriculture becoming a bit of a dumping ground for technology, and then there's none of that integration and talking and understanding of what goes on. So we spend a lot of time working with the farmers and talking about this productivity, efficiency, and real need for what the farmer wants. And we're not going to give you a laser and tell you, okay, we're going to find a problem. We're going to say, what is this problem? Let's dig into it with farmers like Penelope and really understand it from all sides. And it's that integration piece. We can't do this on our own. We can't just take one company, one person. It's got to be technology that will talk to everything else and people that will talk to everybody as well, everyone else as well. So that's where it's got to come in. And we play a big role in trying to get those conversations and translations. And a lot of it's about language. A lot about it is talking to farmers in the wrong language as well. It's not just about the data scientists coming at the wrong angle. It's actually been like, we use a lot of jargon in agriculture too. And we've got to be careful that we don't isolate the technology companies, because that's when they'll come in and develop the wrong product very, very quickly.
I'm obsessed with trying to root out farmer jargon, because there's nothing that alienates the public more than farmer jargon. Just on your point there, we've heard the word profitability. I think it came out in several answers. What do you do, Claire, when the farmer just goes, well, yeah, is it going to make me any money? You know, that bottom line question, is this going to make me money? How do you handle that one?
Well, I think it comes to the scoping of what we're trying to do to start with. Like, you can't develop a product and then understand if it's going to be viable. We have to throw out a lot of ideas very early on. We have to make sure that we throw out these kind of wild things and understand where the price points need to be and what the ambition is of the product and the technology that we're developing. And that's where we can start to be more successful.
There's risk involved.
Yeah, understand the risk early.
We've talked a lot about all of the software and kits and platforms and all of these things that are out there, and they all need one fundamental thing in order to work: the internet, broadband. Does anyone want to pick up that thorny issue of how we level up, to use the term, digital equity in this country and make sure that countryside businesses have got the broadband they need in order to embrace things like Breedr? Who'd like to go on that? Oh, we've got two. We'll take both of you. If we start with you, James, and then Mark.
Well, I suppose I'll come in at a slightly different angle, which is we've got 32 staff that work for Breedr in the UK. We don't have an office. They all work from home. And many of them live in rural areas. And that is a real problem, because we need them to be able to join phone calls and things like that. And what I really am encouraging government to do and local councils is to skip the copper band. You go to Africa and there aren't cables everywhere. There isn't cable run underneath the streets. What they have is masts that work off satellite, and that's the way that they have internet. It comes over the airwaves, over the mobile phone. So really, we should stop giving lots of money to Openreach and BT, and instead look at how we can encourage companies to come in and do it over our phone signal instead.
We heard it here. Stop giving money to Openreach. That's the call. Over to you, Mark.
Can I just pick up on that as well? Because I was at the Royal Welsh Showground in Bilf Wells earlier in the week, and we talked about data mining, and the fact that that's just so crucial in terms of connectivity. And one of the ideas bandied around was seeing a cooperative between farmers for having the data and selling that data, because we've got a massive amount at our fingertips, and there's a lot with DEFRA as well moving forward. So that would be an idea for the future in terms of cooperatives. So.
Thank you. Mark Tufnell.
Thank you. Yes, I mean, I tackled Richard Benyon, who has responsibility in the rural sector for this, and I tackled Nadine Dorris about it. And they say, oh, well, Project Gigabit, it's worth £5 billion, it's all being rolled out. Just relax, it's all going to happen. And actually, in my area in Gloucestershire, we do happen to have a very good superfast broadband. It actually works really well. And in most cases on my telephone, I can get 4G. I know there are not spots, and we're all campaigning furiously to make sure that those not spots are taken away. And there is a government commitment to get it by 2030. But just going back to this whole issue about cost, and I was a vet, did vet science. I was an accountant, and I'm now a farmer. And it's about making sure your costs happen to be less than your income. Now, I would suggest that we're all really, really good at working out the margin, the gross margin, we're all pretty hopeless at working out what our overhead costs are and allocating them properly. And that's where I think a lot of the actual agri-tech can come in. There's a lot you can do with your mobile phone, your smartphone. That is the fourth agricultural revolution. And I just suggest that the kit that's coming forward is there to help you use your input costs sparingly and appropriately to make best use of a lot of these commodities, which are at record highs, and make use of the record high surpluses at the moment. Thank you.
Penelope.
And, well, we've got the mobile 4G, 5G. What we really need to do is be talking to the techies to make sure that 6G and what Ofcom actually are doing works for RTK, which is a global positioning thing. We need to make sure that there aren't not spots. We need to make sure that these really work if we're going to expect to get broadband in places like Wales completely over the spectrum. We need to understand that it isn't just fibre, it isn't just copper, and it isn't... There are other networks, and we have to be part of the discussion of future networks.
Tom Bradshaw.
I don't think anyone's talked about electricity there, Anna, and I think the days are still a long way where we're not going to be reliant on electricity, and the electricity grids in rural areas are under huge pressure. And if we look to electrify a lot of what's going to be on farms or in rural economies, there are huge, huge challenges. So I think we also need to think about how government can support production of electricity at source. You know, wind turbines are very politically sensitive, very challenging, but small-scale wind turbines, solar and batteries on farm are producing the electricity where it's going to be utilised, rather than looking at massive infrastructure projects, upgrading the grid, are the sorts of projects we need to be talking about, because actually a lot of this technology not only requires the internet, but it also requires a lot of electricity.
We have set up some really big, interesting ideas out here. I want to throw to the audience for some questions. Before, I just want to get, how many of you have good broadband at home? Okay, well, we're not doing too bad. Who has shocking broadband or lives in a not spot? Oh no, Ali Cap. Right, okay, so actually, on this very small sample, we're not doing too badly. I'm not sure if it's representative. Any questions on any of the issues that you've heard from our panel? Just for the audience's benefit, the question was, what is the role of farming on getting us to net zero? Big one for the NFU. Over to you, Tom.
Do you know, I nearly came in on this when we were talking about data. One of the challenges with data is that for some reason farmers have been told that data's got value. And actually, if data sits in our businesses and we don't do anything with it at all, then data is actually valueless, it's useless. It's only when we start to utilize it, and often when we start to amalgamate it, that you can really start to get any sort of real value out of that data. So it's either takes a long while over years to collect the right data on your farm, or you need other businesses to amalgamate that data to really make sense of it. And data is going to be absolutely crucial for net zero. It's also, when I look at things like Scope 3 emissions, so when the supermarkets come forward and say we're net zero, they need access to our carbon footprints on farm. And data there, we don't even have an agreed way of calculating that data at the moment, let alone how we're going to get there. But farming is unique in that not only are we a source of carbon, we're also a sink. And so I think that puts us in a really positive frame. We know that a lot of our things like our beef production are some of the most sustainable in the world, same with dairy. And actually there's a really exciting story to tell. So there's a huge amount of work to do in getting to that net zero position and really understanding what carbon sinks we have on our farm as well as where our sources of carbon are. But I do think the data piece and the technology piece is a crucial part of really unlocking that for the future.
Thank you, that was a great question. Any other questions? Just for the benefit of the audience, the question there, another great question, is the role of technology to help us move towards more agroecological systems.
Probably water is a big thing, whether it's flooding or whether it's not having enough water or understanding where the water has gone. We did a project with Cheltenham on the different types of tillage, but also how the water would infiltrate. You've also got biodiversity and being able to count, and I've got a lovely app that's got all the birds and things, so we actually record a lot more all the farm team, when we go out, we're beginning to know a bit more about what we're seeing. But I think it's to do also with carbon, and I don't think the technology is there yet to totally measure our carbon. So it's probably better to keep measuring the sort of systems that we have done over the years. So you've got 15 years of data that work, as opposed to swapping the systems.
I really dislike labels, and somebody in our tent earlier on was saying, well, I voted leave, and somebody else, I voted remain. Look, labels are a horrible thing. Agroforestry is another label. So
Agroecology.
Agroecology. Agro and regenerative agriculture is another label. Nature-friendly farming, climate-friendly farming. Look, we've got to all farm sustainably. That has to be the ambition. I don't care what label we do that under, but when we can produce food in a truly sustainable way alongside environmental delivery, feeding the population at an affordable price, we have hit the sweet spot. And I don't mind what label that is, but that's where we've got to get to, and that's where we need policy levers to get us to that position.
I just want to pick up on something Dr. Julie Ingram said about a potential risk with the development of agri-technology, that it might favour or have a bias towards more, inverted commas, another label coming at you, intensive industrialised systems. Does anyone want to pick up on that thought? I thought that was fascinating.
Well, obviously that's a concern at the moment. As I say, we're lacking the evidence base to back up these concerns, but I think historically, looking back, the way various trajectories have advanced, whether it's with inputs, commercial inputs, it tends to specialise, move towards specialisation, corporate control and power. And these are themes that come up in the literature, but they are very relevant to the farming community as well, at a very practical level. So, as I say, the evidence isn't there yet, but it is a concern for farmers. And I think certainly, as I said, there's a chance to step back and think, what sort of agriculture do we want? I appreciate that labels aren't very helpful, but using digital tools for enabling more efficient farming, whether it's agroecology, agroforestry, regenerative farming, can't be a bad thing, but as long as it's done in an equitable way.
Yeah. Mark Tufnell.
Well, I mean, I think you raise an interesting point, because with fertiliser, nitrogen fertiliser at £705 a tonne, if you can get it, it's jolly expensive. And so you need a machine that's going to make sure that you put it precisely where you want it. But it also means there's a huge incentive for those people to produce an alternative product that does pretty much the same. And it may be something like a legume, or it may be a way of farming.
Thank you. Any other questions? The question is, could the very term agri-tech be putting farmers off? Who would like to take that question?
I think, yes, it can put farmers off. I'll be honest, I'm not amazingly technologically minded, but so it does go on the label. But I think the key there is what we've been talking about, and why we're here today is that fostering that understanding around what's available, and that's why we need to have this dialogue that we've got, because terms such as the new tech startups, etc., and the technology that's available, it becomes less frightening for farmers. But also importantly, we're changing the way the agri schemes are going, the lump sum exit scheme. We're breeding new life into the industry, and we're bringing on the younger generation, and for them, I don't think it's as frightening, anywhere near as frightening. So that's a positive step forward, and I think that will embrace the tech, and there'll be more adoption. But yeah, we've got to move forward together. So.
And over to Mark, who was giving us a thumbs up. I'm going to find out why now.
Well, I'm going to try this microphone, might be better. So you're absolutely right. I'm going to do a plug for my previous college. They've got over there, RAU, Agri-Tech, Food Tech, Climate Tech. It's just all about technology, and the technology to help us be better farmers and use the technology that's out there. But it's not some funny mythical thing that lives in a box somewhere. It's stuff that we already do, and actually a lot of us do it really quite well.
What would you call it, Mark?
Technology. The fourth agricultural revolution and the arrival of the smartphone.
Maybe it's just the shortening to tech that kind of puts people off. We just kept calling it technology.
Isn't it just about driving efficiency? Isn't that what most farmers have been doing for however many years? And it's got to drive the profit as well. And I do understand exactly the question, because for some people, tech seems like it's quite a distant thing, but we also can't expect the whole industry to move at the same time. They never have done, and they never will, because otherwise you'd only have one set of machinery, everything is different and everyone does it differently. And that doesn't mean it's wrong. And I think we've got to be careful not to think that just because somebody isn't utilising the technology, they're not running a very sustainable business, because some of them may well be running some of the most sustainable and profitable businesses, but they haven't adopted any of that.
Thank you very much. Another question? Any questions? That's a really good question for the audience. It's about what's happening at a policy level to make sure that grant money is going into the right place and all of these different things can operate together.
I think I give a real practical example of where it's not working is the countryside productivity small grants for livestock farmers specifically prohibits using a cheap wayhead that connects with a smartphone app. So we link at Breedr with many wayheads, and farmers have to buy a more expensive wayhead that ticks the grant boxes, and it stops the interoperability of data. The government, DEFRA specifically, are looking at the part-own something called the Livestock Information Programme, which is partly owned by AHDB as well. And that's all about bringing livestock data into a central place so that you can use it to do more research and pull out trends. So they're kind of getting it, but kind of not. It is very, very specialised, and I understand why civil servants don't have the expertise to be able to fully understand that. But it is some areas where I think people like the NFU need to push a little bit further and make sure that interoperability of data is available.
Now, I'm going to disagree with him, because actually that twiddly bit, I think I'm right in saying, has actually been changed, because Janet Hughes heard about it. She said, this is ridiculous, we'll change it. Janet Hughes, programme director, spoke at our breakfast. Now, they put out a grant fund for, I think it was about £17 million, and they thought, it's too difficult to fill out the forms, people won't do it, they don't want it. It was 4 or 5 times oversubscribed. So whenever anybody says, we farmers can't fill out forms, if there's money there, we're really good at it, and we're really good at filling out forms for bits of kit, and there's more kit coming out. And we at the CLA will be pressing for more kit as well, in the same way as I'm sure Tom will be.
Over to you, Tom, and this will be the last point. We'll have to wrap it up after you.
The difficult bit here is that it's all well and good focusing on the bits that are within DEFRA's gift, but so much of what we've talked about is actually other departments. And cross-departmental working in government is a real challenge. And that actually is, for me, unlocking that, not just with AgTech, but planning, permissions, and all. There's so much that is cross-departmental that actually underpins or either puts the handbrake on or the accelerator. And at the moment, it's very much the handbrake, and we need the foot putting on the accelerator pretty quickly. And how we unlock that across government, if I manage to achieve that, then I'm probably destined for good things.
Thank you. We're going to have to wrap it up. I just want to say a huge thank you to this panel. We have got about 500 of them here, and we only had 45 minutes. And without those pithy and really to the point answers from each and every one of you, we never would have got through the content and the issues that we did. So they have been absolutely brilliant, and a huge round of applause for them all, please.